We're live? Yeah. Okay, hello. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed our previous live stream, and now we're very lucky to have not one but two members of the Singapore People's Party with us. First up, we're going to talk to Osman Sulaiman, who is running in Bishan Toa Payoh GRC. And then after this, we'll talk to Jose Raymond, the party's chairman. So, welcome Osman. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, this was a bit of a surprise. Didn't expect to meet you today, but I'm really excited to meet you. Okay. Can you tell our audience who maybe might not know so much about you, a bit about yourself? I understand you're a small business owner. You've got two companies, one interior design, one consulting. What else should we know about you?
I've started my business about 5 years ago. So I started off as a business owner, then I've set up another company that help people in debt. And then I've been receiving more people having debt issues because of retrenchment. So we assist these people to go through a government program that they can actually help them to freeze their interest and help their finances.
Oh, okay, fantastic. Yeah. And so what made you get into politics then?
I think it was 20 years ago, I was equipped with a diploma. So I tried to find a job.
Yeah.
Then I couldn't find any. I'm not looking for any executive position, but I was applying for admin assistant. I've tried so much that I couldn't get any job. So I worked as a security guard at a golf course. I think Keppel Country Club. Right. I worked as a security guard. Then it was on a part-time basis. So I noticed that I applied for an admin position there, but I noticed that there are foreigners working while I can't get a job. So this made me to think that, hey, why is this happening? So slowly I read up on policies. Slowly I read up on our immigration policies. This is how I get interested in politics, because I find that at that time job was lost, and as a local Singaporean, even equipped with a reasonable amount of education, I couldn't get any decent job for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, that's very interesting. So you've been directly impacted by the immigration policies.
Correct.
Right. What exactly about the immigration policies, if I might ask, do you feel is flawed, and how would you or your party like to address that?
Okay. I think there is no capping on how many numbers of foreigners they are bringing in.
Yeah.
This resulted in loss of jobs and also stagnation of wages. So I believe that with proper control, it does help to benefit Singaporeans at large to get good jobs, because I was also in HR field for 10 years. So during that time, I think the government create these job banks for Singaporeans, apparently trying to take care of Singaporeans first. But what I find unsuitable or isn't effective is that although they have these local job banks, they call it, so what happened is the employers make known their email address on these job banks. So foreign job seekers can bypass this system. So the system requires Singaporeans to log in with their SingPass or whatever, but then the company made available their email address, so job seekers can bypass this system and email them directly.
Right.
So at the same time, the company is also receiving foreign job seekers and also Singaporean.
Right.
And the period of 2 weeks is not long enough for this to be effective for Singaporeans. So ultimately, and in the end, the job banks is not effective.
So what would your party, the Singapore People's Party, like to fight for when it comes to, would you do away with this job bank, or what are your do you have any specific proposals?
Yeah, I think on our manifesto we touch on extending employment. For the manifesto, I need to look up at my notes back, but we do address that in the long term we need to tighten up our employment laws, and then we also need to extend the retirement age. Totally do away with the retirement age. Because what we feel is that employers now have a certain limit as to when they can retire an employee. Say right now is the age of retirement is 67. So the employer has already set a mindset that at 67 we can retire this worker. So we want to do away with this limitation. So it means open up to even workers up to 70, so that they remain gainfully employed.
But wouldn't that mean that there are fewer jobs if older people stay in the jobs? I mean, I'm an academic, and one of the problems that I find in universities, that academia around the world finds, is that you have older people who have tenure who refuse to retire, and a lot of young people can't get jobs because you've got someone who is way past their effective age, say their 70s, and they've just been teaching the same course for 30 years, they're not producing any new research, they're just sitting there. So I'm not saying this is going to be the same situation every company, but how then would, the obvious question someone would ask is, hey, I'm a young person trying to get a job, but you're saying old people stay in these jobs forever. Wouldn't that mean fewer jobs for me?
Right. Okay, so now what happened is that it is one of the main functions of the government to create good jobs, and then the volume of jobs. So even if we do away with the retirement age, I guess the government also needs to look at how it wants to create more jobs so that more people are gainfully employed. Even though we do away and more aging population can get jobs, so what we need to do is to create more jobs. I mean, there are sectors that the government can reduce reliance on foreign workers. This itself will open up the employment rate for job seekers.
And I think in your manifesto, your party's manifesto, you've talked about things like unemployment insurance, flexi work arrangements, a minimum wage. And so this is part of your whole package. But I guess then the question what a lot of people ask is, how can an opposition party, even if we like your policies, actually make a difference in Parliament? Because even if we elect all of you, there's only 5 of you, and there's 93 seats. So what difference does it make?
I think first of all, to put an opposition more seats into Parliament is towards better accountability. Because I don't think the government is obliged to actually give out info unless questions are raised. So this itself will benefit our country. So although it doesn't change much by having a few seats, but it does have some benefits that we can actually make the government accountable, and then we can raise more questions so that these infos are revealed, and then the numbers are revealed. And as we can see in 2011, I think when more opposition parties are in Parliament, so there are a few changes to the policies that the government starts to listen. So I doubt, in effect, this is, when we have more seats in Parliament, the government will be more attuned to all these issues.
Well, I guess one of the jokes is about how the last time there was a surprise opposition victory, the government really pushed Thum forward. So the joke is, if you want him to be pushed forward again, you better, elect a few more opposition people. So I guess, yes, I see your point there. It's a good point. So what about you personally? Why should the people of Bishan Toa Payoh vote for you?
People know me as someone who is never afraid to speak up for justice. and I will never shy away from issues that is sensitive, you know, like for the Malay community. So I've been involved with a few instances where, you know, example, when who is this Myanmar president
Aung San Suu Kyi.
Aung San Suu Kyi, yeah. When they visited Singapore, I sent a letters to embassy registering my displeasure at how they treat minorities.
Yes.
So I mean, when I'm elected in Parliament, I mean, people can be assured that I make my voice count, and I will represent them for any issue that they want me to raise.
Right.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Malay community. What do you think? What do you want to do specifically for the Malay community?
The long-standing issue has always been about the disproportionate what do you call it? Participation in our education, and we are at the lower rung of the economic sense.
Yeah.
So it has been long-standing since 60 years ago.
Or more, right?
Yeah.
Since the colonial
so
era.
I believe, I mean, the government has to treat this issue at a national level.
Yes.
So, I mean, if I have it my way, then, you know, I would ask all the Malay organization, like even MUIS or Mendaki, AMP, RIMA, to get together and form a task force and look into this matter seriously. I mean, we have a high rate of a high divorce rate. We have high drug abuser.
Yeah.
And then, of course, one of the main important issues is also unemployment. I mean, we have to break the glass ceiling in SAF.
Right.
You know, we have to remove discrimination in uniform groups.
Yeah.
These are jobs that are lost, that, you know, the Malay community can take it up and then be gainfully employed. And when their economic sense is better, I guess this in itself will correct these certain problems that we actually face. See, I believe that, you know, a high divorce rate, part of it is because of finance, you know, and this drug abuse, broken families. So it has to do with our economic situation. So the first thing I would do is to actually to remove this discrimination in the uniform group. So this one allow us to actually get into a better position. Yeah.
Right. Okay, thank you. I think we're going to try asking some questions from the audience. But in the meantime, if we, I think a question that we've gotten is about you personally switching parties. So how do you respond to, especially in this environment where we see a lot of politicians switching parties, and you've run with one of them before?
Yeah. Reform Party.
Right, so you were Reform Party, you were NSP, and now you were SPP. Why did you do that? How would you respond to people saying, oh, you're an opportunist, you're just trying to get elected, you know, you just want to become MP for, I don't know, for the salary or whatever. Like anyone becomes an MP just for the salary. I mean, it's a huge responsibility, guys. It's, you know, running as an opposition politician is a
oftentimes we use our own resources.
Yeah, it's in some ways the kind of abuse that you get from the government and the tax on you and the national scrutiny in the media, including on forums like these, right? I don't see how any salary could make up for that. But okay, the question we've got is about you switching parties and being an opportunist. How would you respond?
I think it's perfectly normal in this current situation, because I mean, it is like in a marriage, you know, if it doesn't work out, people split up and then people go into another union. The same like in a job, you know, it happens everywhere. It's just that this time around it happens in politics. There are many other reasons why people actually shift or go to another party. It can be one of the reasons, it can be that culture change in the party, you know, and then or maybe certain policy change that it doesn't suit the individual with the party's main policy, or it can be downright that it has become toxic inside that you need to get out.
Yes.
I mean, each people will have different likings to a certain condition, but you know, that there are avenues for us to actually, leave the party, and we see any other parties that can blend well with our vision.
So why did you choose the SPP of all the parties then?
Mainly because one of the things is I hold Mr. Cham in high regards, and there's a leadership renewal with SPP, and Jose and Steve is one of my personal friends, so I believe in their leadership quality, and with them and with Mr. Cham's experience, I believe SPP can go a long way.
Right, cool. I think that's a good point. SPP is the only other party, apart from Workers' Party, which seems to have successfully undergone leadership renewal. Right. Even the PAP is struggling with leadership renewal because the 4G have not distinguished themselves, and it looks like Lee Hsien Loong and the older generation keep having to come out. And of course, Vivian last night kept bringing up Tharman as a sort of shield, right? Tharman, you know. So I respect that. I respect that, you know, Mr. Cham has been able to hand over and also to have leadership renewal, and I think that's good.
That is one of my main decision making to why I joined SPP. I mean, of course, I've been approached from a few parties, not to say that they are the lesser party, but it's this aspect that SPP renewed their leadership.
Right.
And we know how people in power couldn't release
yes,
their
there's
position
a lot of people
power.
cling to power, yeah.
So when, you know, I see that there's a leadership renewal, we can actually build the party back again, I quickly jump at the opportunity.
Oh, cool. Okay, thank you. Okay, so there's a question here, oh wait, sorry. Okay, here we go. Question here from Eric Ng. What makes a good government? Wow, that's a very broad question. I guess it's a question also about, it's two things, right? There's a sort of structure, but there's values. And I guess you can, you know, talk a bit maybe about the values of a good government.
I've always believed that there are five main things that make a good government. One is, of course, the building of infrastructure, and then providing of jobs, and education, and healthcare, and also policy making for the people. So these five main policies that I think make a good government better. So I mean, they need to have good infrastructure, and then they need to provide good jobs and also education, and while keeping our medical costs low. These are personally what I think make a good government.
Can I ask you about your vision for the future, right? Let's say that if the SPP were able to form a government, what's your vision for the future of Singapore?
If we are able to form a government, I believe we can do more with transparency, we can do more with our commitment, and then we can also do more with better democracy. Because as we know now, we have a lot of rules regarding, public discourse on certain topics. We can't do this, we can't do that. I think greater democracy brings the country forward. Because without discussing these problems openly and addressing these issues, it's not possible to actually address it and then resolve it. Because it will be kept at the back. It doesn't bring out, no one talk about it, you know. So I think this impedes our progress. Just by having greater democracy. More democracy.
So your vision for good government and for Singapore, greater transparency, greater accountability, greater democracy. That makes a lot of sense. I think because it's very hard to then formulate policies without information, and you can't have information without transparency.
Yes.
And actually, when New Narrative did a survey of our Singaporean community, we asked them what is the biggest issue you see facing Singapore. They said the number one is the lack of transparency and accountability. Because without that, all these other issues you cannot solve.
Yeah.
So I think you put your finger on something important there. Okay, so question here from Hannah Zafira. How do you think we can ensure that fair employment practices are enforced? At the moment, it's only written out in guidelines, but unfortunately many job postings can be rather discriminatory and not inclusive at all. And yeah, we've actually documented this on New Narrative, where you see job ads saying Chinese speakers, right? But even if you're Malay or Indian or other and you can speak Chinese, they'll say, oh no, we actually want a Chinese person, as if somehow that matters. And there's other jobs which are, you know, specifically women only or men only, regardless of whether you can do the job. So at the moment you have all these guidelines, but this question is, how do you actually ensure, on paper we have fair employment practices, how do you enforce them?
I think one of the main things that we need to do is to put it into law, that make it illegal for someone to post discriminatory job posting.
Right.
And then other than that, we can also look into having an ombudsman for the benefit of the citizens, so that they look into the citizens' interests.
Right.
And of course, as a government, they have to lead by example. As we know, there are still discriminatory policies within the government itself. So they have to lead by example, and then make this make it illegal for people to post discriminatory job posting. Yeah.
Right. So currently, it's not actually illegal. It's just guidelines, is it?
Yeah, it's just guideline. Yeah, I mean, at best, someone can complain, and then the company will have to take the posting out. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, we've documented this on New Narrative, where people complain about discriminatory ads or whatever, and then the Ministry of Manpower will respond saying, we have reminded them of the guidelines, and that's it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Okay, so from Antoinette Hendricks, minority men are often overlooked and dismissed in the armed forces and employment. What do you propose to improve this? What do you propose to improve this?
Again, it boils down to how the government look at this situation. I mean, after all, they will have to break the glass ceiling, you know, and then remove this discriminatory policy within the armed forces. There's one time we understand that the government has one of the minister has mentioned that about the loyalty of the Malays if they were to put a machine gun, you know, something to this effect.
Yeah.
So I want to make this clear that I mean, when a minister make this kind of statement, I mean, it does have an effect in the population. You see, the people itself must also reject this kind of discriminatory statement. So make it known that it is not acceptable. So I mean, for the record, I would want any minister to question the loyalties of the Malays. I mean, I would want them to make a record of it. If they really think that the minority cannot be trusted when in times of war, make it a record, rather than, you know, not putting a Malay officer behind a machine gun, behind a fighter pilot. So let the people decide if they really believe this is how Singapore should be governed.
Right.
Yeah.
On that line, we do have a question from someone who asked about what you think about the whole, you know, Tan Wu Ming questioning Pritam Singh about, and then his comment about Alfian Saad. Do you have an opinion on that recent?
I've read a little bit. It's just that I feel a little bit upset, you know, coming from Tan Wu Ming. I mean, it's a little bit condescending.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how to look at it, but as a general I mean, generally I can see that some of the Malays are also upset about his statement, saying that the minorities have it good here, that they can have a job. It makes us look as though we are beholden to the government for jobs.
Yes.
So to this, I have not much comment. It's just that personally, I feel a little bit upset on his statement, questioning Thum.
Yeah. I think it was elitist and racist, if you ask me.
Right.
And it's very disappointing that the PAP was indulging in that kind of politics.
Correct.
So there's a question here of, okay, wait, sorry, Terry, can you stop scrolling up and down? I need to read the question. Well, anyone? Okay. Question here from Kwaseja. What is your position on the GRC system? You're running in a GRC, and you're running in sort of a GRC designated for a Malay candidate. But how do you feel about that whole system?
I'm equal. I'm on the fence on this. Okay.
Yeah.
My position is. I think it does help to. It does help to get the minority a proportionate representation, but at the same time, it also reek of tokenism for the Malay candidates. So, either way, I'm fine with a GRC system, or either way to abolish the GRC system.
Okay.
So I have no position on this actually.
Okay.
Because what I see is that either side have, either arguments have some merits in it.
So if we all had SMCs, right? I mean, we had SMCs before the PAP became 100%, and we actually had nearly around 40% minorities in government I think it was the 63, 68 government was nearly 40% minorities. Do you feel like Singaporeans would vote for minority candidates if they presented themselves? Because the PAP's argument is that they won't.
Yeah. It's a tough question. Maybe times have changed, and a minority fielded in an SMC might get.
Like for example, Mr. Murali beat Dr. Chi in Bukit Batok, right? Or Michael Palmer won previously in Punggol East, right? Punggol East. So minority candidates have won, and it's more about their party and their positions rather than the color of their skin or their religion or the language they speak, I think.
Yeah.
Would you say?
I don't know. Personally, I think we still have this thinking that we still have this thinking that the minority are not up to par when on certain level.
Yeah.
So I'm afraid that without a GRC, then it actually might disadvantage the minority representation. But at the same time, I also believe that our electorate has matured.
Yeah.
That this kind of prejudice has already gone away. So I'm still undecided whether a GRC or
we were
SMC.
mature enough in the 50s and 60s to elect 40% minorities.
True,
I don't see why, in this day and age we can't. But what if like individual constituencies were designated for minorities rather than a whole GRC system? That would be the same effect, right?
Yeah, that's true. But it also depends on on the party itself, whether they really look into having proportionate representation of the minorities, because ultimately the party will decide.
Yeah.
So a party has to be open-minded, and then also attend to the aspiration of the minorities to get represented in parliament.
Okay. So there's a question here about what would you do to improve community cohesiveness between the residents of Bishan Toa Payoh, and what you think can be done to enable the Malay community's social mobility. So two separate questions really. What would you do for Bishan Toa Payoh, especially in terms of community cohesiveness first?
I think more can be done by having more events. That is, more events for the community, for the Bishan Toa Payoh resident. In fact, it doesn't have to be only for Bishan. Since it is a GRC by itself, Bishan and Toa Payoh, they can actually have one big event for people staying together, you know, to get involved in activities, you know, and more person-to-person involvement. Yeah. The same goes to the Malay community social mobility. I mean, the same. Oh, sorry, I read wrongly.
What can be done to enable the Malay community's social mobility?
Yeah, for Malay community social mobility, I still put it down to getting the right job.
Yeah.
I mean, we first have to be having good jobs. That means good jobs. We must remove this prejudice that Malay are lazy, Malay are, you know, a lot of this ill labeled to the Malay community. So first we have to get a job, and then getting gainfully employed will probably solve some of the Malay community social mobility.
Okay. There's a question here about, this might be a bit out of your area of expertise, but your view on CPF and whether you or your party propose changes. So would you have a view there?
We have the CPF policy, I mean, on our manifesto. I think one of the proposed changes that we want to have is that we extend. I think let me think. Okay, we pay part of our CPF. We disburse part of the CPF retirement account. And also we allow the children to use the parents' CPF for education. Yeah. So these are what.
And you've also mentioned raising or abolishing the retirement age.
Yes, correct.
So when would people be able to collect their CPF?
It will still be at 65.
Okay.
It's just that for retirement age is for the employment. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So after 65, would they still be paying into CPF? They can take it all out at 65?
They can opt out.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, our manifesto suggests that it's only partially withdrawn, not full.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. If people want to see the rest of your manifesto, they can go to your website, right? SingaporePeoplesParty.org.sg.
Correct.
Don't go to spp.org.sg. That's not their website. I've made that mistake so many times now. SingaporePeoplesParty.org.sg. Okay, so I guess last question, Osman.
Okay.
Make your pitch to the voters of Bishan Toa Payoh. You know, in a minute or two, why should they vote for you?
Okay, I want to.
And the SPP, sorry. Yeah.
Okay, in SPP, I believe ultimately for Bishan Toa Payoh residents, ultimately is what I mean. It's not about having a clean and green estate. The main priority now is to have good jobs so that our children, I mean our sons, don't have to pay high regressive taxes, and these are the things that matter most. Without a job, you know, I mean, what good is a clean and green neighborhood? And also we have to also ensure that our medical costs remain low, and we have to bring back the old Singapore where, you know, the standard, the cost of living is not as high as now. There are many people I know or I'm assisting that have fallen through the crack, and the system, although we have many social safety net, but it's just not enough. We don't even have a minimum wage. These are the things that is important. So I believe that if you send us to Parliament, we will raise up all these issues that matter to your heart.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Osman. Thank you for joining us here today, and thank you for being willing to sit down and answer questions. You know, it takes courage, especially when it's so easy to simply just do live streams, you know, and to actually sit down and take questions and be challenged on your beliefs. So I really respect you for coming here, but also just for standing up, being heard, and being willing to enter politics and speak up for Singaporeans. So all the best to you. Thank you so much.